Will this be a landmark budget by the Modi government? Should the FM give up fiscal discipline in his quest for growth? Should he actually get tax on boards to make in India really happen? Should he go ahead and tweak the tax slabs to put more money in pockets of consumers like you and I? Those are the questions that we put forward to some of India's top CEOs in the CII-ET NOW poll, and joining me 4 very special guests to debate all of that. Thanks to each one of you for being with us. This is a CII-ET NOW poll that you have participated in, and it has thrown up some really interesting numbers. So Mr. Shriram, I'm going to begin with you. Our first question was, will this be a landmark budget by the Modi government? 9 months in office, Achhe din, Achhe sitare, we'll debate all of that later. 90% of those polled actually say yes. The question that I'm going to ask at this stage is that, are we pinning too much hope on one single budget alone?
Not really, because if you see the last 8-9 months, the government has continuously come up with policy initiatives and implemented various schemes and plans which they plan to do. And as the FM has, himself said, budget is not the only time of the year to make policy. It can happen every day of the year. So I think they are moving ahead consciously, but at the same time, there is a tradition in India. The budget is considered a document which actually looks at taxes, look at what individuals have to pay, what they can save. It is a major event in our culture. So it is important. So at the same time, because the tradition of budget has been so strong, we are looking at the budget even this year to announce changes which are going to have long-term repercussions for growth and development of the economy. So I think, and I'm actually happy to see that the mood and the thinking among the people is that yes, this will be a landmark budget, it will be a forward-looking budget, it will bring about changes for the economy, which is good for India as a whole.
I'll just take a cue from you and throw it to Mr. Banerjee, because you're constantly in touch with the top corporates of India Inc. Budget is one more day in the economic calendar of India, say some of your colleagues. The other believe that this is a make or break budget because this is going to set the policy chain in action for the next 5 years at least. How are you assessing the mood from some of the corporates that you're constantly in touch with, the government that you're speaking to? Can this be a make or break exercise?
People would be looking at what would be the financial strength of the country. So the focus on fiscal, all of this needs to really come out of the budget. How do you kickstart manufacturing? How do you make in India happen actually? How do you look at, if all of this, there is a reason to look forward to the budget to see as enablers coming out, both from the national point of view as well as from the international point of view. Because really, today we would look at the taxation framework, the way it comes out in the budget. So some of the decisions that the budget would really spell out would be extremely important to see.
And which is why it becomes an important exercise.
Yeah.
Mr. Reddy, I will throw this to you. Plenty of expectations. I think the biggest challenge for Mr. Jaitley right now is to manage all of that. Your colleagues like Mr. Deepak Parekh say quarters of India Inc. are beginning to get impatient because 9 months have passed. Action in talk is not resonating on the ground. I have 2 questions to ask of you. Do you believe this is the stage where the government also needs to step back and temper expectations? Because where is that impatience creeping from?
First of all, I don't think you should temper expectations. Expectations should be high. Expectations are depending on the people, especially the leadership in government. And if you have Mr. Modi, Mr. Jaitley and the rest of the team, especially with Mr. Modi's vision for India, expectations are going to be high not only from Indian companies but global companies. And that's how I think things will start gaining momentum, a pace, which I think India has very much lacked for some time. So I clearly believe that expectations are very high. Yes, there is a risk of a bit of disappointment if expectations are high, but also let's expect that the expectations will be met, because I think government knows very well that this is their maiden budget, and I think clearly that this will set the pace for the next 4 years and the rest of the government. So I think I have a strong belief that government will really deliver on the expectations.
9 months out of the 60, too early to judge, too early to be impatient, you believe?
Not really. See, if you look at it from the government's point of view in terms of delivering to the public, see, expectations are also in different time frames. There's low-lying fruit which you could make an impact straight away. Stuff like trains running on time, garbage cleared, clean India, a campaign called Make in India. These are low-lying fruits. Whereas some of the mega infrastructure projects like new ports or bullet trains or 100 new cities, these are expectations which are natural that people would, a rational human being would expect that they would not happen even in the first 5 years maybe, but in a decadic sense, 5 to 10 years. So I think it's important for the government to balance its short-term, medium-term and long-term delivery and not pin too much of the expectations on long-term, but yet look at some of the low-lying fruits, which they have actually. You know, this whole campaign on cleanliness, remove garbage,
That's right.
and many other things have attacked some of the short-term expectations, including a frontal attack, for example, on removal of corruption or transparency in practices. These are some of the ones they have achieved in the short term.
Fair point indeed. I'm going to move to the next point. We asked you the question, will the FM prioritize growth over fiscal discipline? It really is a divided house. 40% of those polled say yes and 35% say no. Mr. Shriram, if I may throw this question to you, growth versus fiscal discipline. We have just about regained fiscal credibility. Maintaining 4.1% looks easy, but should government stick to 3.6% or should growth be given a chance and let that number not be obsessed over, 3.6% if I may?
I think we should not obsess over it, but yes, we should focus and try to achieve it. The reason is, I think more important, that is the money being spent correctly to get the results if we were to overshoot it, say by 0.1% or 0.2%. I think the important point is how to achieve the fiscal discipline, where CII itself has given many, if I may just take a minute to share some, to achieve the fiscal discipline and achieve the targets which they have, is in terms of giving subsidies to those who deserve it through direct bank transfers. I think the initiative already taken by the government on LPG is a wonderful direction. I sincerely hope in this budget, the finance minister lays down a 2-year or 3-year roadmap of doing that on many more areas, so that the people who deserve it should get it, but the leakage in the system is stopped, which will help fiscal discipline.
That's right.
I think that's also required. And especially with the Jan Dhan Yojana scheme and the Aadhaar schemes, I think they've done a great job in reaching out to virtually every individual in the country.
I'm going to speak about subsidy rationalization in just a bit, because that also amounts to the good fortune, the fall in crude oil prices. But Mr. Reddy, I have a question to ask on you on fiscal discipline. Like our survey throws up, corporate India is very divided. Will the ratings agencies be convinced if we were to allow fiscal slippage done in the quest of growth? We have just about, and I'm going to sound repetitive, we are just beginning to regain our fiscal credibility. We managed to close the last year within the limit. This year, perhaps it will be easier to close. Should we let go of all of that, and will the ratings agencies not take us to the cleaners if we were to breach that level?
I don't think it's a question of letting go or going to the cleaners, because those are, I think, a bit of an extreme. But I think it's a question of balancing both. But I feel the focus should be on growth, because growth will also bring fiscal discipline in a matter of time.
That's right.
And if you look at the context of the global economies, even amongst the BRICS, I think all countries are in trouble. So India has a lifetime golden opportunity to really position itself for growth in the next couple of years. And there's huge amount of investments waiting to be put into economies, but nowhere to go. They don't have a home.
That's right.
So I think if we can create that opportunity, or create a home for investment, I think these kinds of opportunities don't come often. Where even 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, all of the countries were booming. Today, most of those countries are in trouble. So this is the time to push growth. Fiscal discipline will come, and it's not going to happen overnight. Fiscal discipline also has to gradually come. But the environment is also certainly helping the government. So they should push for growth.
Fair point indeed. I have a counter question to ask you. We were talking on subsidies. Subsidy rationalization is the big focus. The Prime Minister, when he took office, said, be prepared for those bitter pills in small dosages, and it's going to be palpable. The question that, comes to my mind is, crude oil has fallen by about $50 a barrel over the last 1 year. Do you believe the government has leveraged it enough, or has this opportunity in some sense be squandered?
It's not an easy question to answer, because the benefit that has happened because of crude oil has impacted various portions of the budget or the consolidated fund of India across different heads, whether it's industry or imports, whether it's forex reserves,
etc.
etc.
It has changed the budget mathematics.
Certainly it has helped the budget mathematics, and sometimes, things that happen internationally need not always be bad for the country.
That's right.
This has been a positive development. The repercussions of the falling oil prices impact various silos of the budget making process, if I may put it that way.
That's right.
So the net impact will come on the consolidated, the bottom line of the budget, and therefore provides greater fiscal space for the finance minister to actually effect some extra tougher decisions, which he would have found it difficult to do had oil prices remained at that level. He has that much more headroom now to say, okay, this is the extra fiscal space I have, so I can be tough on various other measures. So to that extent, I think this current budget will certainly take that into account. It's something we all know that the mandarins in the finance ministry are fully conscious of saying, let us not pass by the opportunity that has been presented to us internationally.
Do you believe there is thinking in the government, and because you've been in constant touch through CII dialogues, is there thinking within the government? Has the impact been assessed enough, because crude oil will sooner than later begin to firm up?
You know, I just want to come back to that debate that you really started off on, growth and
Fiscal discipline.
Deficit. You know, growth is important, there's no doubt about that. But if we, like the others have been speaking about, if you overshoot it by a little bit, what can we do about it? If you really plow it back into asset creation, that's going to be the key, and that itself actually would be very important. So how you manage the fiscal deficit, if you go ahead towards creating of infrastructure, towards creating of asset, that can be one very good way of actually using the overshooting of the deficit.
Let's
Can I comment on one
Yes.
point that both Sanjay and Chandrajit made? You know, you posed your question as growth versus fiscal deficit.
You think it's not
You
one
know,
versus the other?
it is not versus anymore. If you see the spate of suggestions and opinions coming out in the press
That's
from economists, think tanks, etc., people are suggesting creative methods of leveraging and garnering funds outside the consolidated fund of India, whether it is suggestions for a national infrastructure fund,
That's
whether
right.
it is channelizing resources from PSU divestment into a separate growth fund, whether leveraging bilateral and other sovereign funds. So the challenge for the government that is being posed is, can you get public expenditure, particularly in asset creation of the type Chandrajit mentioned,
That's right, yes.
by creatively leveraging off-budget funds, which is an exercise that I do not think has been adequately addressed in this country by a succession of finance ministers, and that is
Or
a
at
big
least
challenge.
hasn't got the mind space,
It
if
should.
not.
That is a way to push the.
Let's talk about Make in India. That is smart sloganeering. That has been a big campaign. 90% of those polls say that the budget is likely to announce tax incentives. You have your skin in the game, and so I'm going to ask you, are tax incentives enough to make in India? What else is required?
I think it's not only tax incentives, but the budget is significantly also about taxes, apart from giving the right message. So the taxes will give financial incentives, but also give the message of the importance of Make in India. The government has also taken action on land-related matters, you know, the ease of doing business. So it has to be looked in the consolidated manner. It's not only tax incentives which will make in India, but it's a combination of all these factors.
If I may ask you to come in on this Make in India campaign, a lot of people are now beginning to say, let's just focus on things that will generate jobs. You may not necessarily want everything to be made in India. If services is going to generate jobs, let's go that way. Do you believe at one level there is, in a very simplistic view, too much emphasis on Make in India? I mean, why make everything here when...
No, I think the emphasis is correct, and the reason for that is...
It's almost like import substitution, so to say.
In a way, but I think it's also, working towards the potential of India. Today, with manufacturing, just about 15-16% of GDP, and with India needing 10 million jobs a year for the next 10 years, manufacturing is one sector which can actually provide something on the job front, as well as in terms of economic activity. And I feel the focus on manufacturing is absolutely correct. I would say two factors, which are important to give it an additional push. One, GST. I think this goods and services tax is so critical. Today, if you look at it, India actually is not a common market. Our estimate is, if GST comes in, the cost of doing business will come down by maybe 4-5%,
Right.
which will make India competitive. That's one. The second point I want to make is, the centre is looking at policy changes, and they've taken many steps, whether it's FDI, ease of doing business, Jan Dhan Yojana, Aadhaar, etc., etc., etc. But let's be real, investments do not happen in New Delhi. Investments happen in the states of India.
That's right, yes.
Make in India also, we have to keep in mind a couple of things. That the percentage of services in India, in comparison with manufacturing, is lopsided.
That's right.
And it's not sustainable. Secondly, also look at the job creation, where it is happening. Services is mostly in urban India, but we need to address also rural India requirements, blue collar workers, uneducated people, women. There's so many others who cannot get impacted by services, so it has to be manufacturing. So unless you balance it out, it becomes impossible to really keep everyone happy.
On that note, we'll take a short break here, but we come back and discuss the other poll findings, and some of them are very interesting. Should the finance minister put more money in your pocket? What should he be doing with infrastructure? And more importantly, will fiscal incentives be required for Make in India? Mr. Chatterjee, I'll come to you because the elephant in the room always has been for a while infrastructure. Huge deficit there. 100% of those polls say the thrust will be infrastructure. I don't think anybody had a choice to say a no there. Let me ask you a very point-blank question. This has been spoken about time and again, infrastructure deficit. We just saw a coal block auction finish. Perhaps this is going to translate into power production. What are the three things the government needs to do to fix the infrastructure mess? This is not an easy thing that they can actually address.
Three things, is it?
I'm just boiling it down to
No
three
issue.
things. Feel free to add
You know,
more.
let me just take a minute to really reiterate why people said
That's
from
right.
CII 100%.
Yes.
If you take the high of 9% growth, 4.5 was consumption-driven growth, 4.5 was investment-driven growth.
Yes.
The portion that collapsed really was investment-driven growth. Out of that 4.5%, 60% is infrastructure. So 60 into 4.5, you roughly get a 3% impact on the GDP.
That's right.
That's why you have this elephant in the room. But if you really look at it, even in terms of, it's not fashionable to speak about the plans anymore, but even if you go back to the 12th plan, 50% was 48 was public-private partnership, private capital, and half was public expenditure. So it's very clear that instead of 3, I will just give you 2 major pushes. You have to get PPP up and running, and for me, the biggest expectation in this budget is the fact that the policy announcement of the last budget, which was a 500 crore allocation for a new institution called 3P India, which was to reset the entire risk allocation process. I would love to see a practical announcement this budget to say these are the steps that we have taken to translate that vision into practice by having a very sound, fair institution called 3P India.
That's right.
On the public expenditure front, I think enough debate and discussion has happened. The important thing is how do you get growth and fiscal discipline, and therefore on public expenditure you actually have no choice but to be creative in structuring of consolidated fund vehicles to actually garner a lot of funds which are easy today because of the goodwill that the PM has garnered on his various foreign trips.
That's
Countries are willing to come forward, but as Sanjay Reddy said, where are the vehicles for them to invest? If you have something called a National Infrastructure Fund, if you have something called the National Infrastructure Debt Facility, it provides vehicles for these sovereigns to put their goodwill for India today into those vehicles. So public expenditure and PPP revival are the 2 big pushes that are relevant.
You know, he's really outlined it and drilled it down, so to say, to the 2 things that will revive infrastructure. You're somebody who deals in that space, you deal with the government. Have things changed on the ground? I mean, yes, coal blocks have gone in for big prices. How soon do we see things change around? How soon do we see power production happen? How soon do we see the ports being built, the airports being revived? I mean, you know, all of these are long-term things, aren't they? And yet it is so crucial for any investment to break ground if the infrastructure deficit continues to be as gaping as it is.
See, if you see when the government came in, the new Modi government came in, infrastructure sector was in a mess, and mess is an understatement. So it takes some time to first clean up the mess.
That's right.
And it's a complex mess, not even a straightforward mess. So therefore the question was that how do you actually clean up this? And the government has been working very hard in trying to clean it up. For example, you know, whatever the Supreme Court decision was about coal blocks, the way they moved fast, within 3 months, the speed at which they moved, whatever may be the outcome, the speed at which they moved is unquestionable. And that was amazing. So wherever they're finding opportunities to be able to clean it up, I think they're doing it. Now, obviously, as I said, since it's complex, that needs to be continued and sustained. Parallelly, you need to focus on the future. So it's a combination of the past and the future which is important. One more thing I think which is in infrastructure, because it's not just something which happens only in one ministry, there's so many small things that happen everywhere else. Somebody has to connect all the dots and present it and market it properly. Today, for example, if you say, everyone talks about Make in India. Has manufacturing facilities come up? Have jobs started getting created? No. But it is occupying the mind space of people. So I would suggest actually the government also should take up some other campaign to connect all the infrastructure, something called a Build India campaign or something, where people will everybody starts talking, saying, before you make India, you have to first build the foundation. That's critical. So I think that also the government has to connect all the dots, and that will itself give more momentum to the whole exercise.
Okay, let's just take a break from infrastructure because that's, like we discussed, it's the elephant in the room, should be addressed sooner than later. I'm going to speak to something that corporate India is very gung-ho about, the whole divestment drive. 75% of those polls say that the targets will be higher this year given the market rally. Let's take a break away from divestment. Let's move in a direction forward. Mr. Shriram, I'm going to ask you this question. Mr. Modi doesn't like the word privatization, and yet privatization is perhaps the only way forward. I mean, why have laggards like an Air India, a BSNL, all of those on board when you can actually privatize and monetize them so much better? Isn't that something that corporate India would want to see the budget address?
We would. I think it makes business sense for the government and for the industry or that company is concerned that one divest to our judgment is, and our recommendation to the government is, please target at least 60,000 crores of inflow from dilution of stake in government companies. And the second set is giving those assets or companies which can be run better by someone else.
Do you want to comment on the divestment versus the privatization debate?
I'd like to add just one, is that even the government can also get out of the of many investments that they have into the on private companies. So that
the Suti stakes.
Yeah, so get out of that also, then that also would help. And so it's divestment, which is possible. I mean, bring down your stake of in the public sector banks to 51%. So it's not just the SIC units.
That's right.
So even the and today is the best time to do it. You have got a very strong market, and there is somewhere you need to begin. And I think that signal going out in this budget would be extremely important.
That's important. You want to add?
You know, I want to, it's not only, the government need not only privatize or divest from the companies by selling shares. It can sell assets. If you take NTPC, it owns a large number of power plants. Now, private sector knows how to run a power plant. So, NTPC can be persuaded to sell some of its assets. Government owns 12 major ports. You can sell 4 ports. You don't have to privatize NTPC. So, if you really see, divestment is one strategy where you sell shares of a company and potentially partly privatize it. You need not even do that. You also have an alternative weapon where you sell Sarkari assets for the best price to do that. The second point I want to make is that it would help greatly if the proceeds from these asset sales stroke divestments are not generally muddled into the consolidated fund of India, because then we have lost it. It's been done in the past.
That's right.
The strong recommendation that we have made often from CII is, if you create a special investment fund or an infrastructure fund, and there is a mechanism where they are escrowed there, and the public gets to see very clearly that the proceeds from divestment stroke asset sale are reinvested in building the country.
Mr. Reddy, I'll come to you. I'm completely running out of time here. 2 quick last questions really. 60% of those polled actually believe that the FM is going to tweak tax slabs and put more money into the consumers. Do you believe he has the elbow room to do that? I mean, just in his July budget, he has increased the exemption limit by about 50,000 rupees. So is corporate India being far too optimistic here?
I don't think so, because I don't think the FM will be looking at the past or where we stand today. I think he'll be looking at the next 12 months and seeing what is his expectation of the economy in 12 months. And all trends are positive, whether it's inflation, whether it's crude oil, whether it is interest rates. So I think he will take a call in the next 12 months. And everybody has very high hopes for the next 12 months. And based on that, he'll do his calculations. And I think those calculations will show a positive result.
Fair point indeed. I'm going to go across the table and just get across the lawn actually and just get closing comments. Political capital of this government. They've got 282 members in the Lok Sabha. He's the 6th finance minister. So actually the statistic shows there have been only 6 finance ministers in liberalized India, and he's the only one who actually enjoys majority. What can he do with 282 in this budget?
I think all the policies and plans to give a kickstart to economic growth is essential, because that is what is going to provide jobs. That's what India needs. And we sincerely hope there is a 2-year, 3-year game plan articulated. Couple of important ones which we talked about are GST.
That's right.
I think that is absolutely crucial to get India onto a competitive framework with the world. Second, I would say, is low-cost housing. That is again something where you provide jobs, plus you provide a roof over the head of people who need it. There's so many others. But I think this is the time, I do feel, the FM will come out with a 2-year, 3-year game plan of how to take the economy forward on an aggressive growth path to actually provide jobs and give the country stability.
So does 282 add to his strength?
Of course, and I think we would therefore see an aggressive budget, if one can say that. And so focus on growth, focus on getting investments back. And you must appreciate 60% of is actually consumption demand. And so therefore the point of yours that he needs to really see to it that there is more consumption spending, and we need to see that happen. So
I'll
tax
be happy
break-
to have some more money in my pocket. I don't know about the rest of you. Yes, Mr. Chatterjee.
You know, the sheer political strength in the Lok Sabha allows him actually to cook the best halwa that has ever been cooked in the basement.
That's right.
And I think I would summarize by saying the expectation is growth and fiscal discipline. Both can be achieved. It's not versus.
So it's not one versus the other. Let you have the last word on this. 282 in the Lok Sabha, but Rajya Sabha continues to be a problem. The political capital is with the government. What can he do with this in this budget?
I think with 282, the FM can deliver what nobody else could have delivered or has delivered, is to deliver Mr. Modi's dream of India as a developed nation.
That's it then. It's a wrap here on this poll of CII-ET Now. We'll have to wait and watch how much does Finance Minister Jaitley deliver on the 28th of February. Stay tuned to the channel that brings you news as it happens.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.